Hi, welcome to Shootin' the Sport, where I sit down with your favorite coaches, athletes, and people in the industry to just shoot the, I'm Matison Little, and our guest today is a former college football player. He works in front of and behind the camera with various networks, and someone that I get to call a friend. In today's episode, we talk about the landscape of college athletics, the sacrifices and struggles that come with being a sports broadcaster. We talk about his story and just how he got to where he is today. Reginald Walker Jr., welcome to Shootin' the Sport.
What's up, Matison? How are you?
Good, how are you? Thanks for coming on.
For you, absolutely. Anytime, all the time, every time.
Well, I wanted to have you on as a guest because you're one person that has experiences in multiple areas of sports. So you played collegiately, you worked the production side of things at ESPN, you're on camera a bit, you still do things behind the scenes with Sports Business Journal. So just kind of the various experiences you have and kind of the unique perspective that gives you on sport is, really interesting and something I think that's fun to talk about.
I appreciate that. No, it's, I pride myself, like one of the things I've always tried to be is somebody who can kind of be versatile and step into some different roles. And my career has kind of forced me to do that. And given me the leeway also to do that. So it's one of those things that I take a lot of pride in being able to kind of maneuver in different roles.
And it's important, especially in our field. We're both broadcasters right now. In the freelance role of things especially, that's something that we need to lean on. And I just did play-by-play for the first time yesterday, so I'm figuring it out. It was fun. It was fun. I mean, it's definitely, I love sideline, you know this. We've worked together multiple times. Sideline's my bread and butter. I think I'm a little too nosy to be stuck in a press box, but it was fun.
Well, use that nosy as a term of endearment. I like it, though.
Right. So you started your real sports career playing football at Penn State.
Yeah.
And Penn State, we all know, has one of the most historic and one of the craziest fan bases in college football. What was it like to be on a campus like that and just be part of something that is still so special?
It's interesting you asked that question because I think there are times where I'm still like sort of trying to figure that out, like going backwards and thinking through those days and those moments. But look, it's certainly one of the things that obviously springboarded my life and career. It's the place where I figured out that I didn't want to not be around the stadiums and around the fields and the courts and the game as opposed to doing something else in my career. So that's step one. And then the football part of it itself, I think, and I tell people this all the time, I had the honor, the privilege, whatever superlative you can find despite what people might think of playing for Coach Joe Paterno. And I don't think that I could ever learn as much football as that man forgot. And I say that seriously, and I try to continuously educate myself on the game, talk to different people, see different perspectives. But he just had an ability to always have an answer for whatever the riddle was. And I sort of, throughout my life, I've always tried to find a way to look at the game of football and understand it as well as he did. And again, I don't think I'll ever get there, but I'm going to definitely keep trying.
And in those experiences, playing under someone like Joe Paterno, what are kind of the things that I imagine you pulled a lot away off the field too, just being in an environment, a structured environment like that? How do you feel like that set you up for where you are now?
I think that's the most important aspect is like what he taught us about some of the little things when you're not on the field and just how you handle yourself, how you carry yourself, your personal, I guess for lack of a better term, personal decorum. Here I go with these random words, right? But it was, for him, it was about being where you're supposed to be, the discipline of, if he told us a team meeting was at 4:00, it was really at 3:50. Like you needed to be sitting down, ready to go at 3:50. That's just how things operated. So it was about carrying yourself the right way, respecting other people's time and space, and then holding each other and the people around you accountable for what you expected from them. And then I think the most important part was understanding, right? Like one of the greatest things I learned from him is he didn't expect me to play another position except my own on the field, but he expected me to understand the position next to me so I understood what it meant when I didn't do my job, how it affected that person. And so I think those are some of those small lessons some people would call them small lessons. I call them the sort of pillars that I try to live through and abide by. And the other thing was just like Joe was sometimes the most brutally honest person you'll ever find. And he would hurt your feelings not because he was trying to, but because he was being absolutely flat honest with you. And I think that's what I appreciated the most about him is there was never a time to where I felt like he was sugarcoating anything with me.
And I feel like all of those things are things you use now. I mean, anytime we've worked a game together, we're both there way earlier than necessary. We're both needing to acknowledge the person next to us, especially you in that analyst play-by-play relationship. And I'm sure that comes up in your day-to-day job too with Sports Business Journal. But I want to know give me a crazy story about Coach, something that sticks out to you about like maybe an interaction or something like that with him.
Yeah, there was actually a really good one. There was a situation where, there was a discussion. I don't know what made anybody bring this up, but there was a discussion that I ended up having with Coach about actually potentially being a member also of the Penn State basketball team.
Okay.
And one of the greatest lines, and I'll never forget it, was he looked me dead in the face and he goes, "You're not even a good football player yet. What makes you think you need to be playing basketball?" And it sticks with me because, and most people think of that and they go, "Man, that's mean." It's not. What he was saying is, be great at what you're supposed to be here for and then worry about those other things. And that's a lesson that I'll kind of never forget. And that's a lesson that sticks to me the most. And in another conversation we had, we were talking about a lot of different things and he looked me dead in the face and he goes, "You don't have to play it down to football, but you have no choice. You're going to graduate." And it just kind of struck me as whoa, he's not worried about this, whatever I'm thinking. He's like, you got to have a mindset that's going to prepare you for the rest of forever. And you better understand what your priorities are real fast because you could lose out on both things by not focusing on the one thing.
Right. And do you feel like that mindset maybe has left the landscape of college sports now? I feel like we have a lot of athletes that are, we see it firsthand that transfer for maybe a higher NIL payout and just kind of maybe put all their chips in one basket a little too much. I know there's still obviously the vast majority of them are there for the right reasons, but you have that select handful that maybe chase the wrong things just because of the landscape of everything right now.
I think it's twofold. I think there is some merit to what you said, but I want to make a different point on this because I think this is important. Mm-hmm. We have gotten to the point, and Joe Paterno was obviously one of the last of what we will ever see in terms of his tenure at one place. You start looking at it from a college basketball standpoint where it's easy to kind of point out right now, Roy Williams, Coach K, Tony Bennett, Jim Boeheim, that's just in the ACC that have kind of left the game in the last 5 years or so. And what it's become is a twofold thing. I think for coaches, there's so much pressure to win right away coming from the administrations because they want to not only win, but they need full arenas and stadiums, and they need a lot of cash flow coming in. So for coaches, the pressure to win also puts them in a situation to kind of turn rosters over as much as players taking opportunities to maximize their value in the marketplace as well. So I think as much as we discuss it from a player standpoint, and I don't think that in a lot of ways it's unmerited. Right. I think there is, it's a fair discussion to have. And I don't blame the players at all for going and getting their paper. Let me tell you right now, if I had a chance to do it when I was playing, I probably certainly would have. I tell anybody, it's easy to criticize a player for leaving a school for another school and more money until you're the one that gets someone knocking on your door, putting that amount of money in front of you. Then you make that decision, right? A lot harder to figure that out right. If you're not really in that position. But I think a lot of this, it's a twofold thing. I think the pressure that is placed on at athletic departments and administrations down on their coaches and in the different programs is a factor. And then the second factor is the transfer portal with NIL at the same time. I think there was no time to adjust to one or the other, and it sort of created what we have now, which, look, in a lot of ways, it creates a lot of intrigue. The problem is, I think sometimes in terms of the on-court, on-field, on-pitch, whatever sport you play product, I think where the issue comes in is, especially in a very team-heavy environment, you end up in situations where you don't really know who your team is sometimes until potentially it's too late, which is why I did hear recently, I think it was maybe Mark Pope who made mention of potentially adding more games to the college basketball schedule to allow these teams to kind of get into a better groove a little bit sooner with more time left in their season.
Well, circling back to your college days, because I know if you had NIL, you'd probably be doing this from like a beach somewhere with, you know, a yacht behind you, something like that. But I want to know, what is your craziest Penn State fan base story?
Wow. Yeah. Well, okay. The craziest one I can't tell you. I will just say someone asked me to sign a part of their anatomy that I never thought was really possible. I didn't figure I'd know how to really get that done, so I
Did you
kind
do
of
it?
moved on from that. No,
Okay,
I
you
did
didn't
not.
do
I,
it.
I had to
Okay.
respectfully decline. But I think probably the wildest thing is actually a scenario, and this was actually after I had left school. I graduated and been gone, and I was in Washington D.C. And I was just walking. We're on the way to a restaurant. I was with a couple of friends, and literally a kid walked up to me. At this time, he was probably a teenager. I think because I'd probably been out of school maybe three years or so, and I was in D.C. visiting some friends or whatever. And this kid walked up to me and he goes, "I remember you." And I'm looking at him like, I don't know who you are, right? And he's like, "When I was 12 years old, we came to the spring game and you ran out of stuff to sign that you were wearing. You went in the locker room, got a pair of socks, signed them, and gave them to me." And I was like, "You remember that?" And he said he remembered. He started telling me the spot in the stadium where it happened, which side of the tunnel he was on, the whole thing. It was unbelievable. And I couldn't believe, again, I was somebody that obviously at this point I was not playing in the NFL. I was somebody that I didn't expect someone to remember just off of facial recognition who I was, and he did. And the interesting thing about that is, I'll tell you a little aside on that, Madison. When I was in college playing for Coach Paterno, I couldn't have a beard or any kind of facial hair.
Yeah.
All I could have is a little bit of a mustache, and then I had cornrows, so I had longer hair and no facial hair. By the time this kid saw me, I had short hair and facial hair, and he still knew who I was. So that's probably one of the wildest instances I think I've ever been a part of personally for me, because I didn't think that kid would ever remember who I was.
Right. Well, Reggie Walker, a man of the people over here.
I try to be. That's it's one of the things I think is very, very important is being able to be personable, whatever the environment is. And if you're able to be personable and approachable, I just think there's so much more opportunity and there's so much more that you can add to the world.
Right. Well, that probably a big factor in your success, because you started with ESPN as an associate producer. Like, was that right out of school?
Yeah, pretty much. I worked, you'll love this. Actually, before that, I did spend a little bit of time. I used to work in staffing, actually. I was a recruiter. So I did that before I got a chance to get to ESPN. And what that taught me was how to essentially understand how to articulate skill sets, how to articulate a person's ability, including my own. So it made it a little bit easier for me as I started to grow my career at ESPN to advocate for myself and be able to explain exactly what it is that I can do. What are my skills? What are my strengths and weaknesses?
Well, you did that and climbed from an associate producer, and then you were on ESPN radio, ESPN 3, just contributing as an analyst. And I don't think people from the outside looking in really understand how tough this industry is, how cutthroat it is trying to get those opportunities. What advice do you have for someone that's maybe an associate producer at ESPN trying to climb their way up now to get to where you are and where you've been?
The first thing I tell them is be somewhat careful. There are certain rules and whatnot about being on air and behind the scenes at the same time in terms of a full-time role and kind of freelancing on the side. So the first thing I would tell them is be careful. Make sure they get things cleared. But I think the biggest thing as you sort of try to take that journey and make the climb is don't look down upon any opportunity. I think that's the biggest thing. When I really started getting into doing games, I was doing high school games on the radio for essentially no money. And what that led to was an opportunity to do Division II on the radio for a little bit more than no money. And then that led to an opportunity to do Division I FCS level on the radio for a little bit of money. And then that led to an opportunity to do FBS on television. So you're still going to have to climb. Look, some people are fortunate. They don't have to climb as much as others. But the thing I tell people is no opportunity is too big or too small. You never know who's listening or watching. And I think one of the things that people forget is that talent evaluators, yes, they get a ton of links. And as back in the day, resume reels, if you will, reels mailed to them, they get a ton. But sometimes they're just watching the most random thing, or they're at home with their family and maybe the kids go to bed or the kid says, I want to watch whatever, and they're flipping channels and they hear a voice and they just stop. And if you're doing a great job, they mark that down. That's the kind of thing that I think people forget happens, and they think that certain opportunities are not as important as others. I've done everything possible probably out there. I've said yes to a ton of things. And my whole mindset of doing that is, how can I take this seriously and get better from it? And if you're willing to do that, I think you've got a chance in this business.
Yeah, one of the early things I did out of school was obviously I needed any opportunity to get reps. And that's kind of the bread and butter of it all. So I paid to go to a CrossFit competition, and I pitched myself to help produce social content where I interviewed these CrossFit athletes after they did their different, like, I would say, like, skills. And that ended up going out on social media, and I paid to be there. Like, I paid the admission fee to be there. What do you think is kind of the biggest sacrifice you've made, or maybe the craziest situation you've been in the course of your career trying to make it?
Probably, this has probably happened way more times than it should have, but particularly in my job now, but in general, I travel. And so I've had some hairy situations where it was trying to get back in time to go do a game. But one of those that I really remember, we went to Eastern Kentucky. Gardner Webb was playing a road playoff game at Eastern Kentucky a few years ago, and if anybody does the math, from Charlotte, that's a 5+ hour drive. We decided that our mindset, and we did this most of the time because we're on the radio side, we decided to get there 3 hours early, which turned out to be a good thing because there were some equipment things with that stadium and the visitor radio booth. That's a whole nother conversation. But we realized we got there and we did the game, and the game was like later in the afternoon, evening. There were like almost or near or basically over 100 points scored in the game, like 1,000 yards of offense, all these crazy numbers. But again, we were the up and back crew. We make the drive up, do the game, drive back. Well, all of a sudden on the drive back, you get to about Knoxville, Tennessee, and your eyes get real heavy. I was not driving, but I couldn't go to sleep because that's not fair to the driver.
Right.
And so it was one of the longest sort of 3 hour stretches back from Knoxville or just east of Knoxville back to the Charlotte area that I've possibly been a part of. And after that, we had a conversation with each other, and we were like, no, that probably was a bad idea. And we probably should have went the route of planning for that a little bit better and hoteling it, and then getting up early the next morning and driving out and at least getting a few hours of sleep. So that was probably one of the more dangerous. And then this past season, actually, 2024 football season, Hurricane Helene. Anybody that's in the Carolinas, you know what that thing did, the destruction as well. It was a race. I was up in New York for work. I had to try to get back to Charlotte so I could get to my vehicle and then get to Greenville, North Carolina for an ECU game that Saturday. But the coaches' meeting was on Friday. There was no Zoom. It was an in-person meeting on Friday. So that got interesting. I remember the pilot saying, flying out of New York, I'm probably not going to turn the seatbelt sign off because it's going to be bumpy getting into Charlotte. Matison, that was the smoothest flight I've ever been on in my life.
It's calm before the storm.
Unbelievable. Got here in time, was able to safely navigate my way to Greenville, North Carolina. I had to take the longer route to get there to avoid some of the weather, but we made it work. So those are a couple of those situations that got a little dicey.
Well, Hurricane Helene, my first football game of the season was down at Citadel, and ETSU was bussing over. It's supposed to be a noon kickoff. They ended up getting stranded, ETSU did, for like 8 hours in their bus. So we ended up having a delayed kickoff. These poor athletes slept on a bus. Coaches hitchhiked to get them dinner. And it was just one of those situations where, like, it's really unfortunate, but to be able to tell that story and to bring light to the seriousness of it all, like, that's one of my favorite parts of the job. And then the post-game interview, because ETSU somehow ended up winning after all of that, the post-game interview with Coach, like, that's why I love my job. And I know these little moments that people are like, wow, that seems like it's tough, it's a big sacrifice, but those little moments that you get out of it are like what makes our job so worth it.
So here's the crazy part about the story you just told and the stories I was just telling. There is a parallel there. The coach at Gardner-Webb, when we were at Eastern Kentucky, was Trey Lamb. The coach that you are mentioning from ETSU is Trey Lamb. The fact that those two things intersect with that, and by the way, shout out to Trey Lamb, one of the best in terms of coaches that I've ever worked with that allowed me true access to his program, always very, very honest with me in my game preparation, what I would see on film versus what they were trying to accomplish. One of the best people. I wish him nothing but success at Tulsa and wherever his career may take him. He's always been one of the people that I think is going to be an absolute star in the world of college football.
So eventually you get to where you want to be working with ESPN. You're with a network, that's all us young broadcasters' dreams. And then that widespread layoff comes, and, you know, tens and hundreds of people got laid off in that, and you had to readjust again. In those moments of adversity, why do you keep going? Why do you stay in this industry? What motivates you to, you know, keep doing what you love?
It's two things. It's about what I love, right? The sport, the game, the being able to tell the stories, right? Because ESPN was a place that, you know, I thought was my last employer, maybe not necessarily my last job description, if you will, but I thought it'd be my last employer, which for me, at someone at that age, you know, in the 30s, like, to feel like you're never going to have to work anywhere else, that sounded pretty cool to me. But what it comes down to is, you know, the biggest thing that pushed me is my parents and my sister. Like, those three people, particularly, and look, I love my parents. They're awesome people. Shout out to Reginald Sr. and Sharon. Love y'all. But my sister is like the ultimate motivator, that I think her ability to kind of, in a way, like, she knows how to pull out of me what I need to hear from myself to take those next steps. And she's so consistent with doing that. She's so smart about how to make that work. I go back to her and her motivation for me, and her inspire me with all she's done in her life and career. And then my parents and everything that they were able to build based on where they came from in their lives. So I would say for me, that's the main thing is those three people. And then understanding, and again, this goes back to my sister. My sister was always like, you have an ability to do other things. Like, you don't have to do just one thing within this space of sports / media
Right.
to have success. So don't be afraid to use the other skills that you have.
Right. Sisters are special. I have two of them, and I'm so lucky. So now that you're in this semi-new lifestyle of freelancing and working with Sports Business Journal, how do you balance it all while traveling for work, picking up games, but also still trying to stay sane in seasons and just have a life outside of sports as well?
Yeah, it's about balance and understanding. I think what I've gotten really good at over time is when to say no. You know, I talked about taking those opportunities, but you have to know when to say no. And then the other thing is you find the other ways to kind of create a space for yourself to find the time to do the things you need to do for the work, and then do the things you need to do personally. One of the things that I've tried to be better about, particularly especially during football season, is I try to, and the fortunate thing for me with ESPN Plus and what the leadership has allowed for me over there is I'm mostly in the same conference. I am mostly in the American Athletic Conference. I'm one of the few probably on this earth that still builds my own football charts. So what I try to do in July and August is I try to, and you use different resources in terms of preview guides and all those things, make calls to coaches. I try to build sort of my shells of my charts early, so I'm not starting from scratch every week. I try to build one, a set obviously for every team, offense, defense, obviously, and I keep my special teams on there as well. I try to get that done before the season really starts, so that there's a little bit less time consuming steps that I have to take during the season. The second piece of it, I do travel a lot for Sports Business Journal, particularly in the fall. Very disciplined. When we're done with the work that we need to do, grab something to eat. I'm back in my room. I can look at film for a while, work on my stuff, and that's not taking away from my job, so that I can maximize that time. So those are some of the things I try to do. And then I love, I love watching the NFL on Sunday. I really do. But during that time on Sunday, I'm also getting my charts ready for my game that following week. So if I can stay a little bit ahead, that helps. So that's kind of the main thing that I do, is try to stay ahead, try to jump out in front of those things as much as I can.
Who's your NFL team?
Tennessee Titans, we are absolutely horrible right now. But I hope that we can get this thing going in the right direction. I did not like the fact that they moved on from Coach Vrabel a couple of years ago. That bothered me thoroughly. And we are now reaping what we sow, if you will, as Titans fans. But hopefully they can get back toward the mountaintop. I'm still devastated by the Kevin Dyson situation against the St. Louis Rams in the Super Bowl years ago. The funniest thing about that is one of my good friends to this day, Kevin Carter, was on that Rams team, won a Super Bowl, but was an absolute menace as a defensive end for the Titans as well in parts of his career. So it's always interesting being around him, and every now and then we'll bring that game up, and I tell him how mad I was, and then at the same time I tell him I'm happy that he was able to get a ring.
When you're traveling and balancing everything, what are some non-negotiables for you? Like things you have to do every day for your personal, like self-care things that you have to do each and every day. I know you've hopped on a Zoom call and cut off after a workout a time or two. So
Yes. Yes. I try to still get my workouts in on the road. A big one for me is reflection, right? I try to take 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes every day. Sometimes it's in the evening before I go to bed. Sometimes it's in the morning when I wake up. But I try to take 10 minutes. Sometimes it's both in one day, right? I got to reflect on the previous day and then the same day. And what I try to do is just reflect on whether decisions that I made that I could have been better informed before I made them. How could I have been better in a day that I can carry over to the next day? And that's been really helpful for me. The other thing is I try to find the positive in everything, right? Like I say it all the time. One of those situations, as I mentioned, trying to get home from New York, I don't know if it was fortunate on my part or what, but I happened to have my iPad and have my things with me. So as I sat in the airport dealing with delays, I just watched film. You just find time to do those things. And so in my mind, and most people are going, wait, she said, how does that help you balance it? Well, guess what? That meant when I got off the plane, I didn't have to think about watching that film. I didn't have to think about taking those notes. I could actually lay down and go to sleep and get some rest and then get up the next day and go do what I have to do. So those are some of the main things that I do. And then every once in a while, if I get an opportunity, I just, and this is going to sound crazy, I just go for a drive.
Yeah.
And I turn some music on. And I've told my friends this story before, but like there are different routes in the city of Charlotte that you could take that kind of allows you that time. And I found one that's pretty good. It's about an hour. So I just jump in the car and I throw on whoever artist I'm in the mood for. And you talk about a variance. There is a variance. And I just ride for an hour. And that allows me an opportunity to clear my head, clear some space, and just really kind of reset.
If you were a baseball player, what would your walk-up song be?
Oh, I was getting ready to. Well, I'll say this anyway. I do not condone some of the things that he's been involved with, but Mystical's "The Man Right Here." That would be my
Okay.
walk-up song.
Okay. I think I would go like a Pretty Girl Rock, Carrie Hilson.
Ooh,
Oldie but
good
goodie.
call. Good call. I like that. I like that. Or I would do Maybach Music 4 by Rick Ross. It'd be one of those
Okay.
two. But
Okay.
that's a good pull out of you. Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks. I've thought about it a lot.
That's
It wasn't
strong. I
off the
like
top of
that.
my head. So what is the future for Reggie? What do you want to accomplish in your career? What are some goals you have set out for your personal life and work life?
Work wise, look, I just want to continue to in my job at Sports Business Journal. I just want to continue to lift the brand, the company, and the people around me, and be a part of positivity. In terms of as a broadcaster, look, the goal right now, and always been my goal is once we get to college football season, I want a game every week. I'm at a point right now. I don't necessarily have a game every week. That's my biggest goal. I want to be able to work consistently and be able to be in stadiums and talk to coaches and talk to players and tell these players stories and watch them grow and develop as players and get to potentially the NFL and maybe even become Hall of Famers. So the big thing for me is how can I continue to sort of enhance the game and get more opportunities to be in that booth and tell those stories. And then, from another personal standpoint is where can I help people get better in this space? So, one of the things I take a ton of pride in, and I don't mean this in a bad way, Madison, because it's always awesome working with you, but I take a lot of pride in working with different people and being able to give them something that they can take away from working with me that helps them get better and helps them get towards their next goal. That's important to me. That's why I enjoy different situations working with different people to be able to give them a little bit of my perspective. It may not be right. I don't know if I know I don't know everything, but I know a couple of things. And if I can give somebody something that they can take with them and they can continue to use that as fuel, then I want to be able to do that on a consistent basis.
Well, I will say that as someone who is still in the early stages of my career, working with you this basketball season, you have been a huge help to me. I know you've been a help to other people. You're always willing to sit down and talk with even the students about your experiences. But a big takeaway I had from you personally was just to look at the big picture and really specifically in the open. We talk a lot about setting the stage and finding the biggest storyline and honing in on that and working together. So that was something I took away. Obviously, we're a team, so working together and really establishing a plan. That was a big lesson for me that you taught me. So thank you.
You're welcome. I'm humbled by you saying that, and I think, I've always said this, right? Like, I have a background as a producer as well, but at the same time, I'm going to stay in my lane until I see an opportunity that can help us all be better. I had a situation earlier this season. I was doing a game, and we were not really aware of it. You look up during basketball season. You look up, conference commissioner is actually in the arena. Okay, we don't necessarily have someone that we didn't have a sideline that day. And so my mindset was, oh, we hit a timeout. Producer, I respect you. I love you. Don't really care what you have to tell me in this break right now. I'm going to go make sure the commissioner is good to pop on with us at halftime. And if it means here's my headset, play-by-play person, take care of this interview, it's worth it because you can never avoid an opportunity to get a chance with the commissioner. And someone immediately said to me, oh, you can't turn your producer hat off. And I said, not in this moment. It's too important.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I really appreciate you coming on today. This was fun. We'll have to do it again soon, and I wish you luck through your relaxing summer, hopefully, and praying you get a game a week in football season.
Madison, let me tell you, I appreciate you so much. I'm honored to watch your star rise as you continue to grow in this business. And like I said, as it relates to this show right here, anytime, every time, all the time.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much, Reggie Walker Jr.